All right, everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Gridiron Uncensored podcast. Special episode tonight. Got a friend, Jake, coming over from the Walk-On Redshirts. So he's a big-time Ohio State fan. We're looking forward to get all of his insights on this team as we go in. You know, they're primed for a huge season. We're going to talk about Minnesota, Nebraska, and Northwestern later in the show. But first, we're going to go ahead and just get right into it with Ohio State. Obviously, you know, 2023 didn't finish the way they wanted it to. The Michigan game was close. And then you go into, you get the transfer portal period and people start leaving. You lose Kyle McCord. And then you go in and play Missouri. Great defensive game. Obviously, Ohio State's strong on defense, top 3 last year. But it's still, you couldn't get anything going offensively. But that really doesn't matter anymore. Things have changed. New offensive coordinator. You got a new quarterback coming in. So let's start talking 2024 on this team. Trevor, I know I feel the same way. Kind of. I like Kyle McCord. I know he had moments. So you look at the portal. They went out and got Will Howard. Mm-hmm. What do you think about Will Howard? And then Jake, we'll get your takes on it too. Do you think it's an upgrade? Because I feel a lot of Ohio State fans do believe it is.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people do think that Will Howard is an upgrade. And in some aspects of his game, I do think that it is an upgrade, more or less his running game, his running style, and the way he plays the quarterback position in general. Throwing ability, I honestly think him and Kyle McCord are very, very similar as far as the throwing ability. But athleticism, Will Howard has Kyle McCord, I think, in spades. He has him beat out for that. But I said it a while ago when it happened, and I really don't like. I think it's Kyle McCord would be like a B player. I think Will Howard might be a B+ player, as far as that goes. But with the transfer portal, they brought in a few other people that that I find a little bit more impressive, at least after the spring game. So I kind of wanted to get your take on that, honestly, Jake. Is that one, Will Howard? How do you feel about it as opposed to replacing Kyle McCord? And two, how did you feel about after the spring game and kind of what you've been hearing about Julian saying?
Yeah, so Will Howard, I think a lot of people are along the same lines of what you're saying, that he probably is an upgrade, but we're not talking about going from a B to an A+ here. We're talking about going from a B to a B+, A-. Will Howard brings a lot of starting experience. Mm-hmm. Kyle McCord, in my mind, if you take the Notre Dame game out of last year, and really you take like the final 2 drives out of the Notre Dame game last year, I think we view Kyle McCord in a very different light. That final drive against Notre Dame, he almost throws a game-winning touchdown to Emeka Egbuka. He throws it, gets to the 1-yard line. Throws a fade pattern to Marvin Harrison Jr., doesn't complete, and then Chip Trayanum ended up scoring. If he loses that Notre Dame game, I think we view Kyle McCord as a C+ B- quarterback at that point, because not only did he lose to Michigan, then he loses his other big game of the year with Notre Dame. And, he didn't necessarily get run out of town, but if he loses Notre Dame at Michigan, he is run out of town. Like that 100% is happening. Like they are telling him to be benched, and they're telling him he's gone. And, credit to him, he did make the plays when they were important towards the end of the game. He made some big time throws in that game. Notre Dame has an incredible defense. So, it's not like it's easy to do that against Notre Dame. They've got one of the best corners in the country. But I think Will Howard brings a little bit more experience that this type of team needs to win a championship, because you look up and down the roster, they don't need a CJ Stroud. They don't need Justin Fields this year. They basically need a game manager with the amount of talent on this offense and defense to just do enough to win games.
Yes. Yep. I agree with you. Trevor, you mentioned Julian saying.
I really love everything I've read and heard about Julian saying is that everybody is screaming his praises at this point about how he's picking up the offense, how he looks with the offense in general. And I was just wondering what you've been hearing about his potentially being in an actual competition with Will Howard for that starting spot.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not buying it. This is just me. I'm not buying a true freshman stepping on campus. I mean, technically he even transferred in, but he was
Yeah.
for all of spring ball. Going against, not only is he having to beat out Will Howard, Devin Brown is still there, and they're still very high on Devin Brown. Like, I think if you're talking about two quarterbacks competing for the job, it's Devin Brown and Will Howard. It's not
Okay.
Julian Sayin. Now, I do think what Sayin brings, I do think he is going to find a way on the field, whether it be garbage time, whether it be some way he finds his way on the field. I really like, they say that he can spin it, and I really think, but for a true freshman, for what
Yeah.
we're going with right now,
Right.
you're taking a monumental risk putting a freshman out there with the amount of offense that you have out there. And I look to 2025 for Julian Sayin, and I mean, Ohio State, of course, they've got, one of the top 5 players in the country with Tavian St. Clair coming in, that they're just going to be loaded at the quarterback for the next, 5 years as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've got a really deep quarterback room, and like you say, recruiting as well. But I agree with you. You when it comes to quarterback play, you just need somebody, especially like you said, on a team this talented, just to make the first downs, make the crucial third down plays, be able to use the legs if when you need to, and have that be a factor. And I think Will Howard's going to do that with his experience. I think that was a good pickup in the portal. Um,
And I don't think you should sleep on Devin Brown yet, because we really haven't seen what Devin Brown is. We thought we were going to get a chance to see against Missouri, and then he gets injured, in the first quarter,
Yeah.
beginning of second. I forget when it was. And then you've got to throw true freshman Lincoln Keenholz out there, and the playbook's basically scrapped because
yeah,
the guy that was the third string all year but became second string during bowl practice, where they didn't think that he was actually going to be the full-time starter. There was talk about maybe him rotating in. He's having to run the full offense, and there's a reason why the offense didn't look good, because you were basically on your third string quarterback, and
Right.
they were ready for Devin Brown to go, and then of course he got injured. He got injured earlier in the year against I forget, I think it was Penn State,
I think
where he hurt his ankle, was out for a couple weeks. Kyle McCord and Devin Brown were head to head, up until the start of the year, and
Wasn't it that Brown got injured, like some sort of injury flared up, and that's what pushed Kyle McCord ahead of him, or did he get straight out beat?
Devin Brown got hurt in the spring prior,
Okay.
so Kyle McCord definitely gained a little bit of momentum there. And then the fall, they were both healthy, and there was I want to say, quote unquote, competition. But when they played Indiana at the start of the year, Kyle McCord got every series through the first half except for one, and it was to end the half, and Devin Brown ran the ball twice and handed it off once. So
Yeah.
you didn't even get to see him throw the ball, and it wasn't even really a fair chance. And it kind of felt like these unweighted, this not fairly weighted competition between the two of them.
Just strokes of bad luck for Brown. I give him props for hanging around. It's so easy to jump in the portal nowadays. So he shows a lot of guts sticking around, and he obviously he feels he can lead this offense. So curious to see what chance he might get. We talk quarterback. Obviously, they went out and got some strong players on the offensive side and defensive side too. Caleb Downs being probably the main one, but then also Judkins on offense. Him and Henderson in the backfield is going to be nasty. I don't know how you're going to slow him down, truly. And when I talk, obviously Ohio State, the only thing like last year that felt really off to me was the offensive line at times. And I wonder this year, is it going to be similar? I know, they brought in the guy from Alabama. His name
Seth
escapes me at the
McLaughlin.
moment. McLaughlin,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, so I think that'll help. I don't know if he's going to play center. Do you know what they're going to do with that? 'Cause
Yeah,
he obviously
so
had issues.
it sounds like he is going to likely be the center. So Carson Hinsman was the starting center last year and actually got benched for the Missouri game. There was some speculation on the reason why. He actually went on a podcast and basically talked about how, in his sense, the practices were harder under Urban Meyer, but he was only a sophomore. So it's kind of hard to understand. How are you saying what things were like under Urban Meyer when Urban Meyer hasn't been there since 2018 and you got on campus in 2022? So he was basically saying
strange.
how offensive linemen aren't paid as fairly in NIL. There was some speculation that did he do this and get punished? There was some talk about Matthew Jones, who was a 6-year lineman, how he was the backup center. So they shifted the offensive lineman for the bowl game. So it's another thing of
Yeah.
You play with the same 5 guys, and then all of a sudden in the bowl game, you shifted it a little bit, which doesn't sound like a lot, but now all of a sudden a different guy snapping the ball to a third string quarterback, and you've got a different right guard. It's just a recipe for disaster, honestly. Like, nobody notices it.
Absolutely. You cannot, the one area of this game that you don't want to mess with is the offensive line and the cohesiveness of the offensive line. As soon as you mess with that, usually bad things happen.
Yeah, so it sounds like McLaughlin's going to take over for Hinsman. Hinsman's basically going to take a step back because he just didn't do enough at center.
Yeah,
he was considered to be one of the worst offensive linemen for Ohio State. So the reason why they went out and got an experienced center, and McLaughlin was honestly very good, other than his snapping issues.
Yeah,
he was considered to be a very, very good offensive lineman, other than the snapping issues. And it's kind of like, did he have the yips? What was going on? And if you can get that corrected, you have a very solid, perennial all Big Ten center.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. When you watch his run blocking tape, even pass block, he did wonderful in those situations. But yeah, it's just that if he can square that away, they're going to be even better at, and like we talked about the running game. I mean, that's what you need. You need that cohesive offensive line. And he's really good at run blocking. I mean, there's going to be holes all over the field for these guys to run through. And it's a hell of a tandem.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue last year was on the right side. So Josh Fryer he struggled. Like he was struggling with edge rushers all of last year. The left side, they brought in Josh Simmons from San Diego State, and to start the year, he had a couple of miscues. He was struggling to get it down, but towards the end of the year, he really held his own on the left side. Between him and Donovan Jackson on the left side, like they were holding their own. Donovan Jackson had a chance to probably go pro, probably would have been a mid-round pick, and decided to come back. Josh Simmons, he's probably not going to be like a day 1, day 2 pick, but he should probably by the end of the year probably be third team all Big Ten, honorable mention for sure. And it wouldn't shock me if he ends up a little bit higher than that. Right guard is the only spot that actually is open when you think about it. They didn't end up getting a tackle, so Josh Fryer is probably going to be slotted back in at right tackle, and hopefully another year of experience will help him grow. But they've got a couple 4- and 5-star guys that are young that should fill in at right guard for them.
Nice.
Okay, cool. I mean, obviously they're uber talented with recruiting.
They got a lot going for them right now.
And Ohio State fans want the offensive line coach fired every single year, because if it's not basically at Michigan at this point, they want him fired.
Yeah, and that's we'll talk about kind of hot seat stuff later, because there's been conversation. But again, you look at this team, and I mentioned earlier they really attacked the portal. I think they did a great job at plugging holes where maybe guys just aren't ready to step in yet. But they got people that they absolutely needed. Caleb Downs being huge for this defense.
That was huge. But to speak even more so to filling holes, talk about filling a huge hole that's left by Marvin Harrison Jr. by magically finding Jeremiah Smith and picking him up. And the dude is just a monster. The guy is just an absolute scary, scary monster.
It's not fair, man.
I don't know if Jeremiah Smith will lead the team in receptions or receiving yards, but I have this weird feeling that he will lead the team in receiving touchdowns. That's going to be that's my bold take right now. Because you have Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate's great. You've got loaded. I mean, it's actually probably a little more thin at wide receiver than people know, because there's been some transfers out and there's a lot of inexperience there. Brandon Ennis actually was injured, so he injured his foot, missed the spring game, so he's expected to be back, but you just never know with these things that linger. Bryson Rogers entered the portal, came back, and he was a little bit lower rated guy. Jaden Ballard's a 4th-year guy and just was supposed to be a burner, but you're a redshirt junior and you haven't been playing at Ohio State wide receiver. Like, why aren't you playing at this point? So we'll see, but it wouldn't shock me with Jeremiah Smith being the number 1 wide receiver in his freshman season, because he is just a freak.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, all the tape from him coming out of the spring. I know it's spring ball, but still, you make those types of plays, and you're going to make them during the games too.
Yeah.
So really, look, offense. I'd say maybe offensive line is probably the lowest rated, and we're talking, minimal differences, and this is still a great team, great offensive line. But as an Ohio State team,
actually one of the biggest question marks is tight end, because you lose Cade Stover, who Cade Stover was an incredible piece on that team. He was a great receiving threat. And there's some guys that have some experience. Guy Scott has been there for a couple of years and has made some plays. They bring in a guy from Ohio. Jelani Thurman's the guy they talk a lot about, but Cade Stover, has been a very reliable threat. 2 years ago when they played Penn State, they were down and, they ended up just kind of flexing their muscles. Travion Henderson goes for like a 30-yard run, and then they hit Cade Stover down the middle and just like takes off 2 guys and just runs into the end zone. And, Cade Stover was known as Farmer Gronk, and he just had that farmer power in him and just strength and just, it'll be interesting to see how they use tight ends and without having a Cade Stover-like player.
Do you think it'll be tight end by committee, you think?
It feels like
because I know they picked up at least one young tight end, Matt LeBlanc, I think his name is 6'3", 6'3.5", 222.
Ohio State never has really been big on freshman tight ends. They definitely want them because you've got to build their frame a little bit. They're usually sophomores, juniors by the time they get in there. And it seems like Jelani Thurman, Will Carmack, I think is that. I forget.
I'm not sure. I read it weird too, like Kasmeric or something.
Yeah, and then Guy Scott. I think those 3 will be by committee. Jelani Thurman is still kind of thin, and it wouldn't be. He's probably gonna be more of like the receiving, while Scott and Will probably be more of the blocking.
And the pickup from Ohio, I think. That's a big body dude, 6'6". So at least that's what he's listed as. But you're right, replacing Stover is going to be tough. But when it all comes down to it, I still think they've got enough weapons to do what they need to do. And if you're using Will as just a check down guy or just a big body to go up against a safety, I think you'll be all right.
With the usage thing, it kind of brings us into like the next kind of quick little topic that I was gonna ask you about is like, what did you think about the kind of roller coaster of the offseason with the coaching carousel that is Ohio State with Bill O'Brien coming in and leaving? Now you get the diamond in the rough, this Chip Kelly just coming on in.
I wasn't super high on Bill O'Brien. I thought it was
as you should have been
move. I thought it was okay. Like I thought that they could have went way worse, but I kind of understood where they were coming from as well. Bill O'Brien, he was at Alabama. He helped build some of the better offensives there, but it's also Alabama. But at the same time, like when I viewed him, like, well, it's Alabama. I'm like, well, it's Ohio State, so like, similar aspect there. It's not like we're talking about like offensive coordinator at New Mexico versus the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, like similar talent levels, similar going on. And I'll be interested to see with Chip Kelly because Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have a very good relationship. Ryan Day played for Chip Kelly. He coached with Chip Kelly plenty of times. Now it's reversed where Day is in charge and Kelly is the offensive coordinator. And I heard something the other day where Chip Kelly was at one of the they were hosting their camps right now, and he said, I've never been anywhere where they've got 6 practice fields. He's like, I've never been anywhere where you've got 6 practice fields for football to be able to do whatever you want. Or, when we were in Oregon, we had to go to a regional camp. We didn't host regional camp. So it'll be interesting to see how he does because he hasn't been an offensive coordinator in a long time. He's been head coach forever. So how is that dynamic going to work? Day's supposedly going to let go of the offense. If he's going to let it go, it
that
makes sense
is a
to
huge
go to
question.
his best friend, basically.
That's a huge question for me personally. Is like I'm wondering, can Day back off enough and become more of the CEO of the Ohio State Buckeyes as opposed to the guy that just runs the offense and defense and kind of has his hands in everything as opposed to managing the game? I'm curious to see if he's going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and honestly, we probably won't know until the end of October when they play Penn State, or honestly, early October when they play Oregon. That because the first couple of weeks are kind of a cakewalk, and we can be the offensive coordinator. We'll beat most of those teams.
Hey, look, we got plenty of training on NCAA 14 and soon to be 25. So we'd be good, all right. But I am curious to see, like you guys mentioned, if he'll actually hand off the reins. We've seen that with other coaches doing it. We've seen other coaches be headstrong and they keep doing their own thing, pounding their head into a rock. Jimbo Fisher, I'm looking at you, and things tank. So I like what they did with Chip Kelly. I think that's really good. I really think the offense is just going to keep rolling. Defensively, same thing. I mean, this defense is freaking loaded. And I mean,
Sickening.
it's just you go from a top 3 defense last year, you bring back pretty much everybody all across the line, Sawyer, JT, then like I said, you bring in Caleb Downs to help at safety. Maybe linebacker might be, from my research, might be the weakest point.
Linebacker is the most inexperienced, honestly.
Yeah.
So you lose Steel Chambers, you lose Tommy Eichenberg. Cody Simon was the 3rd linebacker last year. He rotated in when they brought 3 linebackers in. He was always the 3rd. Actually had a couple big plays against Notre Dame earlier in the year. So you know if you're playing in that and you're getting the trust. He made a 4th down stop. Sonny Styles technically made the 4th down stop, but he made a play to force the stop. And then CJ Hicks has been talked about for about 6 years by Ohio State fans, waiting for him to go. But Sonny Styles actually moves from safety to linebacker, probably his better position, because I mean the guy's like 6'6", probably shouldn't be playing safety.
Yeah.
Probably was too big to be playing safety, but they were trying to figure out a way to put him on the field, and you couldn't take Tommy or Steele off. So they're like, well, we'll just stick you at safety and just kind of move you around. And now there'll be a rotation between Cody Simon, CJ Hicks, and Sonny Styles, which might take some time to work it out, but luckily they've got a handful of games to figure it out.
They got what? Shoot, I'd say
you got to Oregon to get figured out.
Yeah. I mean, depending on if Iowa can figure out their offensive,
I'm not. I'm not.
I'm not putting money on it though.
I'm not buying that yet. Like, I don't care if they got a new offensive coordinator. I'm not buying it until I see it.
Yeah. I'm not buying it either.
We just did an episode on them, and it was kind of like, all right, great defense, but that offense again, it can't be worse, right? And then Trevor's like, well, I mean, you never know.
In theory, they could be.
I mean, who knows? But yeah, that Oregon game,
one of those things where they might say, "Hold my beer" and just go.
The thing with the defensive line though is they need to find a way to get home more, because
yeah,
Jack Sawyer had 3 sacks against Missouri. He felt like a coming out party for him, but it's like we need to see it more frequently. JT Tuimoloau had arguably one of the best defensive games the last 10 years against Penn State 2 years ago.
Yeah,
when he had 2 interceptions, a pick 6, a couple sacks, a forced fumble, fumble recovery. He had the game of his life. But what else did you do that year? You hit the absolute high note. But then it's like Ohio State fans were like, but what's next?
Consistency is key at that, especially at the linebacker position. You have to be consistently playing well. Yeah. At the level that Ohio State expects their players to play at, it's almost like if you can't be consistent, you have these one-off games. That's great, but
yes,
they need the
1,000%
consistent play.
1,000%. And these guys, they're uber talented. Sometimes it feels like there is a game plan against Ohio State of like, get the ball out quick. Like the edge rushers are incredible. They're great. Yeah. Get it out in 2.5 seconds, because if you have it more than 2.5 seconds, they're going to be in your face. Because JT actually had a very great game against Olufashanu last year when Penn State came to town. He had multiple pressures. He played very well, and is Olufashanu's worst game of the year, and just he happens to have great games against Penn State apparently.
Yeah,
but it's like these other teams have worse left tackles than Olufashanu. Why are you not taking advantage of this?
Right.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think I've seen that across boards and just chatter during the season too. Is where's the consistency? These guys are strong players. We want to see more of it week in, week out. So I wonder if they can get that out of them this year. But I guess let's just go ahead and talk schedule, because we look at it and again, up to Oregon. That Oregon game is massive. I mean, Oregon's a loaded team too, so that's going to be one of the we wrote down as one of the, obviously everybody else too, but biggest game of the year.
It could be arguably the best game of the season.
Yeah, I mean everybody should have that circled. If you don't, you're sleeping under a rock or something's wrong with you, or you're just a hater. And then after that, Nebraska, they're trying to reload with a freshman at quarterback. Penn State, James Franklin. What? I know he's got his problems. I like him hanging around personally at Penn State, but that's just how it is with James Franklin. And then Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, and then, of course, Michigan at the end. But Michigan's got new stuff going on, quarterback, offensive line. So I think it really lines up nicely for Ohio State. It's just get through Oregon, and then you got a bye week. And then you're kind of good, man. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah, you look at the schedule, like, this year's interesting because of the double bye for everybody, how the schedule lines up. And Ohio State, that second bye coming against Oregon couldn't come at a better time because they get a nice stretch run then where, like, Nebraska, they have an easy schedule. They might actually be undefeated when that game comes, but it's going to feel like the Nebraska game when they were undefeated. I think it was 2016. I think they were like 7-1 or 8-1 when Bo Pelini came in, and then Ohio State won like 63-7.
Yeah.
Some ungodly number where it was 2 10 teams. Or like when Michigan State and Ohio State played back in 2021 and it's 49-0 at halftime. Like, it might look like a good game by the records, but let's be real, like, it's not going to be that good of a game.
Yeah, exactly right. So
that State's an interesting one because it's supposedly it's going to be like a noon or maybe 3:30 game based off of the rumors. And I'm also not sold on Penn State they don't have wide receivers, like any of them. They have Julian Fleming from Ohio State who left because he wanted to be a number one and was not going to be a number one, even with the freshman coming in. Like, he wasn't even going to be number two. And then that Michigan game at the end of the year, it's going to be interesting in Sharon Moore's first year. There's a lot of stuff coming out of them, but like, there's a lot of things that concern me about it. Like, he can't recruit yet. Like, they have like 5 guys. Like, you're coming off a national championship and you still trying to sell a program that there's a lot to me that doesn't make sense. But that Oregon game with the 12-team playoff doesn't make or break. It 100% no longer makes or break. There's no reason Ohio State shouldn't be in the playoff this year. Like, there's absolutely no reason. It's inexcusable not to be in the 12-team playoff.
So that kind of rolls into the kind of wrap up question that I wanted to ask you. What is a successful season look like for the fan base of Ohio State? And more importantly, and probably the scarier question is, what puts Ryan Day and Chip Kelly under the microscope and into potentially a hot seat situation?
Are we saying hot seat like he doesn't have a job next year, or hot seat?
No, hot seat like you better fix whatever the hell just happened.
If they miss the playoff, their ass is on fire. Like, that's 1,000%. You get into the playoff, and it honestly is going to start. I think this year is like an all bets are off kind of situation because
of all the changes and everything like that.
There's all these changes, and with rankings, like, let's say they end up 11-1, and with how the scheduling works, like, and they don't, because of tiebreakers, they don't end up making the Big Ten championship, but they're 11-1, and then all of a sudden, instead of they're a 6 seed that hosts a dangerous LSU team. And LSU ends up, winning that game because, LSU's, the 11 seed or whatnot, or even, however, I'm not sure that a first round exit really puts them on the hot seat. I think there's going to be a lot of fan base that'll be like, we got to talk.
Yeah.
But there's the problem with getting rid of a coach, especially at this level of success, is what better are you going to find?
Yes.
And with what the roster currently is a makeup of and what they've got coming in, is it really worth it to blow it up because of 1 year? Or because you see what happens when schools blow it up and then they fall downhill. Like, is it really worth it?
Yeah, when you F around and find out, you sometimes don't really want to find out.
Yeah. No. It's like, you think back, like, I always think back to Michigan when they fired Lloyd Carr. Michigan fired Lloyd Carr. He couldn't beat Ohio State.
Went into mediocrity for the next 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
They hire Rich Rodriguez. They hire
Brady
Hoke. Jim Harbaugh was about to be fired in 2020. He was 2-6 and about to be fired and had to take a pay cut to keep his job. So you went from 2008 to 2020. Yeah, there were a couple of high years there, but like, you went from mediocrity. You beat Ohio State once from 2004 to 2020. Like, I think back on that, like, is it really worth that to do that? Or like, Ohio State's going to always be able to recruit. That's one thing, but because of NIL, but how that changes here soon with revenue distribution and the brand, like, you want to have consistency. And Ohio State continues to put guys in the NFL. They're going to continue to put guys in the NFL. They're going to probably have like at least 3 or 4 first-round picks next year. Like, it's hard to say let's fire a guy because he went 10-2.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, it's a Michigan problem, and just like for Jim Harbaugh, it was an Ohio State problem until things got solved. I mean, Ryan Day is obviously, I think he's one of the top 5 coaches in the country, if not top 3. So I mean, who else is going to be above him outside of Kirby and maybe Dabo? So that's hard to get rid of somebody like that. But I see obviously the wheels are turning, the fires are people get upset when, okay, Michigan's beat us 3 times in a row. This hasn't happened, in a while. Like you said, it's been a long time since Michigan's had a streak. So with Michigan having a new quarterback, new offensive line, the new coaching staff, if they lose to Michigan and Ohio, to me, that's kind of like, okay, the fan base might get really, really pissed, even if they make the playoffs.
The game's in Columbus. Like, if they lose that game, the city might burn down because now we're 6 months away from that game. So a lot can happen. A lot can happen. Guys get injured. Guys don't perform to the level that they should be. Alex Orji, God forbid, could actually be a good quarterback, even though nobody in the world
forbid, he
says. Alex Orji can't throw a ball much better than JJ McCarthy. Actually, he throws it significantly worse. And I don't think JJ McCarthy throws a good ball either, but somehow he was first round. But we are a long way away. Donovan Edwards is really good. Tony Alford stole the playbook already.
Yeah.
Connor Stallions is still existing.
He's in the spy plane. He's in the spy plane, baby.
But so that for me, that's more of where I would look if that game goes down and say I think the expanded playoff helps a lot, and not just Ohio State, any coach that might be on the hot seat. If you're contending for that spot, that last spot, even, I think you're going to buy yourself a lot of leniency as any coach. But Ryan Day's right up. I mean, he's one of the top, so I can't see getting rid of him unless, especially this year. But next year, if things go south this season, I would say, okay, things didn't happen with this loaded team. What's going on? What are we going to do in the future? I agree. I don't think you fire him, but you're going to see more shakeups.
And again, I don't think it's because with the conference, it's 18 teams, the tiebreakers to get a conference championship all of a sudden become a lot harder than when it was 12, even 14.
Agreed.
You had divisions. Now there's no divisions, and going, one loss, you might have 3 or 4 teams in the conference that have 1 loss. And now we're only sending 2 of those 4. And it might be a weird tiebreaker that is the reason you don't go. So I don't think saying, well, you have to win the Big Ten, because basically you're saying you have to go undefeated, because if you don't go undefeated, you're not guaranteeing yourself a spot.
Right.
In Oregon, Penn State, Michigan are all really good teams. As much as I don't want to admit that Michigan might be good, like they still are going to have a great defense. Alex Orji is going to run the triple option. They're going to move the ball forward, but they're still going to be a good team.
Agreed. Well, it'll definitely be interesting to see how it plays out, but I think we're all on the same page. This is from all the teams that we've covered so far, from the ACC and going through the Big Ten. This team is the most loaded that we've covered so far. And we've talked Clemson, we've talked Florida State. Those are strong teams, but this Ohio State team is built different, and they're going to contend, in my opinion, for a national championship this year. So we will see what happens. But guys, anything else on Ohio State? No, Jake, we appreciate
you guys having me,
man. Thanks for joining us, bud.
It's been great, man. Seriously, we'll talk to you later, man. Have a good one.
Appreciate it.
All right, take care, man.
All right, guys. So for our podcast listeners, we had a friend, Jake, on. He was from the Walk-On Redshirts.
Go follow them on their YouTube. Go follow them on X or Twitter. And definitely give them a look. They're very knowledgeable about their football.
very knowledgeable guys. They love talking football. So yeah, go follow them. And again, we appreciate their time. So he has signed off. Trevor and I will proceed and continue with the remaining 3 teams that we're covering tonight, and we're just going to roll on. Minnesota's next.
That's right.
Biggest things dropping for them today was new uniforms. They look pretty solid, I think.
That's about all I can say about that.
But I like Minnie. They do have 71% returning, and they have an over under 4.5. And that right there is where it's like, okay, well, other teams have had higher percent returning, and they're 7% projected wins. That doesn't always matter. Returning percentage, it does not always matter. They got to be good, okay. And Minnesota, they lost their quarterback.
They do.
So
they have some turnover at the coaching position. They have some promotions, some demotions, and other things, but there hasn't been a lot of firings necessarily, but there's been shuffling of responsibilities really, with what is this? PJ Fleck. God bless. I couldn't think of his name.
Okay.
But PJ Fleck has been doing, and he's shuffling some things around, which is fine. I mean, no big deal, except for the fact that you have North Carolina right out the gate. That's a problem. I mean, North Carolina is not, I don't have them where they were last year. However, it's still North Carolina to start out your season, and you are still Minnesota. And I'm just going to be honest about that. That's trouble right out the gate. You get a couple games with Rhode Island, Nevada, then you get Iowa, Michigan, USC, UCLA, Maryland, all in that stretch. So, when you get out of those first 3 games, you better be ready to rock and roll, Minnesota, because the Big Ten's are coming for you.
Yes. And you look at last year, again, it was a disappointment, even though they won a bowl game. It was, the quick win
they did
against Bowling Green. So those things are good. Okay. But you gotta find a way to roll on. And they did go out on the portal. They brought in 13, they lost 18. And I will say, when I look at their portal class, it's not bad, honestly, for who they bring in. I feel like it outweighed who they lost. Outside of,
I would say
outside of Kaliak Manis. Obviously quarterback play, you hate losing a starting quarterback,
right?
But they're happy. It sounds like, from everything I've read, with who they're bringing in.
I really like the Jackson Howard pickup from LSU. I like the Tyler Williams pickup from Georgia.
Yep.
6'3" wide receiver that will definitely help in the red zone.
Christian Driver coming over from Penn State. You're looking at talent coming in. And then of course go ahead, Trevor.
No, I was just looking at some of their guys. I was like, I actually like them picking up. I don't know. I have not done a ton of research on him. I was trying to research a little bit about him, but Dylan Whitkey, quarterback out of Virginia Tech, coming in. He's a 3-star, 6'1", 201. Knowing Virginia Tech, maybe he's a mobile quarterback.
So I don't think he'll be the main guy, though. It's good to have that depth. It sounds like Max Brosmer coming over from New Hampshire is going to be the guy. They like what he's done. He's got a better passing percentage. He's more of I want to say, game manager. I know people say that's derogatory, but I don't think it is. I would rather have somebody
with the ball. That means you're smart with the ball.
Give me first downs. People, he's a handoff merchant. He's a game manager. I don't give a shit what he is. Did he win me a football game? He did. All right, I'm happy with it. And that's what they're saying about him on their boards. And what I'm reading from Minnesota fans is that they're happy with Max Brosmer. They see it as an upgrade over Kaliak Manis. Now, of course, teams are going to say that, we lost somebody, he's trash. But I can see, statistically, why they might feel he'll be better for this team. But it really is going to go off PJ Fleck and how he's running this team. I like what he does. He's in a tough conference. It's hard to win in the Big Ten. But you look at his overall record. I mean, he's 5-0 in bowl games. At Minnesota. He's 50-34 overall, but it's a conference record that 29-32. So it's like splitting every game. but out of conference, he's not bad. I know they lost in North Carolina last year, and they play them this year, but it's a different North Carolina team, like you said, Trevor. So we'll see what they do with that. But they did get some good players, and they have a returning 4 or 5 offensive linemen, which helps big time.
And they picked up a few good players in the recruiting ranks too. I mean, they did really good on the defensive side of the ball, specifically with picking up 2 4-star players. One is a top 100 player, which you don't necessarily hear Minnesota getting very often. But he's in-state. He was an in-state recruit. So kudos to Minnesota for keeping an in-state recruit that is a top 100 national player in the state of Minnesota. And that's Coy Perich. That might not be right, but Perich. He's a safety, 6'1.5" at 200 pounds, and he is rated the best. He's the best player in the state of Minnesota, the 5th best safety in the nation, and he's nationally ranked at 72nd best player in the country. So that is a very big pickup for Minnesota. I hope he pans out, and I hope they develop him well. But speaking of the other player that I wanted to point out, the kid from Riley Sunrum, he's a D lineman, 6'4", 275, number 1 in his state, number 27th at the position, and a top 200 player, 167 to be exact, nationally.
Nice.
And that is 2 really good pickups, both top 200 players. And I think those are the only. They have one other player. He's an offensive tackle. He's just outside the top 200, but he's from Wisconsin, the 11th ranked offensive tackle in the nation, in Nathan Roy. And also he's kind of smaller, actually, 6'5", 275. I say that jokingly.
I know.
He's whatever.
He'll beef up, baby.
But those are some really, really solid, at minimum, depth pickups that you can develop into very good players. Those are good key players that bring in and develop. Because, I mean, when's the last time that you heard that Minnesota is pulling top 100 players nationally ranked? I mean, you don't hear it very often. So I get hats off to him for keeping that kid in state, because more than likely he had plenty of offers.
Yeah, and that pairs too back to the transfer portal and getting some of these guys, like you mentioned earlier, Jackson Howard, Tyler Williams, these guys from big schools. They've got the 35th ranked transfer class too. So there's talent in Minnesota. And again, this is Big Ten football. There's always talent. These guys, they just play a different style of ball. So you watch it, may not be like the SEC, may not be like, the high flying like the Big 12, but these are good teams, and you're gonna feel it each week. So like you mentioned, you got 4 of the 5 offensive linemen coming back. You've got Max Prosper coming in at quarterback. I kind of feel good about this offense, especially when you have Darius Taylor at running back too. And this guy, he showed a lot last year, I thought.
Yeah.
And
I'll tell you what, Brennan, I think the real telling thing of seeing where Minnesota is how they handle playing North Carolina in week 1.
Yeah.
I know North Carolina doesn't have Drake May anymore or anything like that. However, they're still a fairly decent team, and it'll be a very, very good test to see where Minnesota is in week 1. So I think we'll find out really quickly where that team is as a whole, week 1 of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, hell, last year they had a hell of a start against Nebraska and won the game in a tight one. So you beat North Carolina, you get a 2-week break, and then you go play Iowa, who's again going to have a strong defense, but you beat them last year. I know that there was a fluke and whatever people say, with the punt return, but still, you play Iowa, you've got a really good chance to start 4-0 with all the returning players that you have. You've got your number 1 offense, you've got your number 1 receiver coming back. Really, it's the defense to me that scares me a little bit, and the depth at cornerback. But honestly, you look at the schedule.
It just the way it finishes, man, it just doesn't give them too much of a break, because almost every single team that's left, like obviously Michigan and Penn State are going to be rough. Don't get me wrong, But USC's rough. UCLA, I think, is going to had this new energy about them with the new head coach. We talked about that in the previous episode. Maryland, we're going to talk about them a little later on in I think next week. And Illinois, we talked about them. They are in kind of a make or break mode right now with their coaching staff and the way they're trying to get things going. Rutgers, we haven't talked about them yet, but both me and Brendan both think very highly of what they're doing there. And then Wisconsin is, I think they're going to have a breakout season. I think they're going to recover well and, come back strong from a lackluster season last year.
Yeah. So that's when, we talked about, hot seat. I think you just keep rolling with PJ Fleck and let him just keep cooking and doing his thing and, continue building what he's been doing. I know he's been there for a minute. I know. Just keep having patience because this is a tough schedule. But with the offense that you have, I think you should be fine and you should be competitive in most of these games.
Right.
But I mean, you do have an over under 4.5. Really go for a bowl game. Go get 6 wins and make a bowl game and see what next year brings. That's kind of how I feel about Minnesota this year. Trev, you want to move on to Nebraska?
Yeah, let's talk about the good old Cornhuskers.
Old Cornhuskers, baby.
Cornhuskers.
Look, man. Nebraska's got a lot of hype this year.
Man, do they ever? I mean,
I get it. These teams, hype happens kind of organically because you're already Nebraska. Everybody, knows this team. There's you've already got a microscope on you. And then you go out and you get Dylan Raiola, and which is huge moment for them. Because I mean that alone, you're beating out Georgia and all this other stuff. You come back with 71% of returning production, and you got an over under from Vegas of 7.5. So they're already like, oh, hold on, this team, they're already going bowling. Just the fact that they got a new quarterback, they're sending them to the bowl game. But man, I'll tell you, last year, they went 5-7. Matt Rule's first year finished horribly. But again, Nebraska has this curse of 1-score losses. I can't remember the exact stat. I should have pulled it up, but it's like, I mean, horrible. Over the last 5, 6, 7 years, they've got like 31-score losses. It's insane. And you look at 2023, it's the same thing. 1-score loss against Minnesota, 1-score loss against Michigan State, 1 score against Maryland, 1 score against Wisconsin, and 1 score against Iowa. Good Lord, man. Finish a freaking game. So you get a quarterback in Raiola. You got, good, solid portal class coming in. I can see, and when I say solid in the rankings, it's obviously not up there. It's 64th, but you've got a running back coming in from Oregon. You've got big body wide receivers. This could be a really fun offense.
Right.
Really. And you had a strong defense last year. I think that's where all your hype is, Trevor.
Yeah. Man, like they have a ton of hype going on. They have a really good incoming set of players. I feel like I like the fact that they brought in Dante Dowdell out of Oregon, running back, 6'2", 215, which could, I mean, you could probably throw him at a slot receiver and still do great. I definitely like some of the players. They got a 6'4" wide receiver coming from Wake Forest, who's actually rated as a 4-star wide receiver, but was only a 3-star coming out of high school. Jamal Banks. Yeah, exactly right. Yep. So Nebraska has a lot of optimism, but until they prove it on the field, it is cautious optimism, in my opinion.
Agreed. I feel the same way about a lot of teams. I mentioned Penn State. Talk about Texas A&M. Talk Nebraska. You got to show it, and I know each year's different, so I always temper expectations.
And
look, I like what they're doing.
I like what they're doing too, but there's another little wrinkle into the whole Matt Rule thing here. So he brings in a brand new offensive coordinator. They get a new offensive line coach. plus a new offensive coordinator. Marcus Satterfield is the new offensive coordinator. And I don't know. And Marcus Satterfield's the coach, and they've lost the tight ends coach, and he will take over as the tight ends coach. Additionally, let's see here, Josh Martin, who was an analyst for the Huskers, is now serving as the offensive assistant coach, whatever that means. Like, they've got a little bit of changes here, but I don't think anything out of crazy madness. But, any change to the coaching staff could be a good thing, could be a bad thing.
Yep. You never know with cohesion, but I'll say Matt Rule always has a history of a second-year jump. I feel like anywhere
he does.
he's gone,
I'll tell you what, he does. And the minute Nebraska hired him, I liked the hire. I liked the hire last year. I did not get people gave him a lot of crap last year. I was like, I don't know what y'all expected. He hasn't even gotten a chance to do a real recruiting class yet.
Look who was that quarterback last. I know Jeff Sims, he came in from Georgia Tech, but it's just not good, man. It just was not good. He's since moved on. So, I mean, look, I think this is going to be a good team this year.
4-year stretch will be the defining moment of Matt Rule's tenure at Nebraska. When you have an elite quarterback like that, let me see you develop this elite quarterback into something that will propel Nebraska back to the forefront of college football.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see, because I'll tell you what, no matter what anyone says or what the way you feel about Nebraska, them being up there with the Michigans, with the Ohio States, with the Oregons and whomever else, if they're in contention, it is a good thing for college football.
I absolutely agree. And you want these teams to be good, because that means usually the rest of the conference is, going through them and having issues of their own. And that makes chaos. And I love chaos. I'm a freaking
Bring it
chaos.
on. Love the chaos.
So let's talk a little chaos, I guess, when it comes to the schedule. They did bring in a little O-line help from Makuza from Florida. So that's another piece, trying to bolster that offense. But you look at the schedule, and it lines up so nice to start. I honestly, until week, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. And then week 9, you go play Ohio State.
Yep. And that starts kind of a tougher stretch, I should say.
Do not overlook Rutgers. I'm going to say it again. Do not overlook them.
Please. No, do not overlook these guys.
But
oh my gosh.
When you look at it, and Jake mentioned it in the Ohio State segment.
Yep.
There is a very real potential that Ohio State and Nebraska could be an undefeated matchup.
Yep.
Ohio State's got to get through Oregon, and Nebraska's got to just not mess up. You go play Utah, Colorado. They need revenge against Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, bye week, Indiana. You could see it, folks. You could see a undefeated matchup between Nebraska and Ohio State simply because of how this schedule shakes out for Nebraska. The hype train is going to be nuts. And really, when I'm going to judge this team is obviously Colorado. Who is Colorado again? We're going to do our preview on them later. They need to beat Colorado. But how are they going to play against Rutgers? That's going to be my gauge of, okay, is this a serious team or not? If it's tight and, they look, Rayola's not throwing well, and okay, they're done. This Ohio State game is not even going to be it's going to be kind of like what Jake mentioned. Could it be a blowout? I'm sure as shit could. But let's see what they do against Rutgers. That's my judgment on this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'll I'd say that. Honestly, I think a really early indicator is if they have a problem with Colorado. That will tell me everything I need to know.
That's freaking true too. If they lose to Colorado, Lord, I mean, look, I think Colorado's going to be improved from what they were. Okay,
they'll be improved. That's what I'm saying is I feel like it'll be a good early indicator on how far or how maybe not so far Nebraska has come.
Yeah, and I will say too, because I don't want it to seem unfair, you're putting a lot of pressure on a young quarterback. I mean, they're talking about a lot of pressure. So like you said, Trevor, I give them some leniency. If they fail, the season, only goes 6 wins, I'm not going to be mad about it. I think Matt Rule's a good hire. They got a great quarterback in Rayola. Let's see what he does in real game action. But I think they're on the uptrend. And, honestly, the way this thing shakes out, the back end of the schedule is tough. But that front end, you could see them, 7-0 before.
Yeah, I
before
plan on
going,
watching.
so.
I plan on being. Well, I'm gonna watch all the games. I don't even give a shit. I have stuff all. I'm ready. Already ready.
Oh yeah, I'm prepped. My body is ready for the season. Trev, you want to move on and let's talk
Yeah,
about
let's go to
Northwestern?
the Purple People Eaters.
All right. Well, I'll say about them, they have 59%. Sorry, I dropped my pen. There it is. But hey, look, Northwestern 5.5 over under. They returned 59% of their production. Yeah, obviously 2023 had challenges. They lose Pat Fitzgerald, who's been there for a long time. He had a hazing scandal. And then, lo and behold, they turn shit around. I mean, just out of nowhere, it seems like they flipped a switch. And yes, they did lose to Nebraska, but then they went out and beat Maryland. Lost a tight game to Iowa. I mean, 10-7. Because they went Brom, they promoted him to head coach. And I feel like the team really rallied about him. And even last year when they played Penn State, I remember watching that game, and Northwestern was in this game for a long time. They made a couple, in my opinion, boneheaded decisions. They went for it in their own zone really early, and within the 30-yard line of their own side of the field, and it turned it over. And that's free points for Penn State. So I was like, I didn't like that. But outside of that, they went out, they beat Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois, and Utah in the bowl game. And you could feel the momentum churning and going in their favor. So I'm curious to see how 2024 plays out. When the portal, they brought in 5, they lost 12. Nothing crazy impressive. Obviously 112th class. But really, they're just trying to plug gaps because they lost a lot of offensive linemen. One to Michigan, their highest graded one in pre-Bay. But they did bring a quarterback in, and that's who they're excited about the most, and Mike Wright, Trevor.
Yeah.
They feel like he's going to be able to lead this offense. From all I've read on them and what they're excited about what he's doing and what he's going to bring to the table.
And as they should. I mean, I think he's a big body. He's a big guy. I think that they're going to be very, very happy with that. I mean, they did lose Brebe, no doubt about that, but they did bring in an inside offensive lineman from SC, 6'5", 305, Cooper Lovelace.
Mm-hmm.
Love that name, by the way. I'll
Jack
be rooting
Bailey
for you, Lovelace.
oh
man.
But
no, overall they
got a couple others.
They had another offensive tackle. Yeah, right here. 3 of them.
Jack Bailey,
Jake Bailey and Matt Keeler, one from Colorado, one from Texas Tech. Mr. Keeler is quite large, 6'6", 305.
Yeah,
that's they're gonna have some big bodies on the offensive line. You can kind of tell that maybe they're definitely gearing up for a tough defensive front. In week in and week out in the Big Ten, I feel like.
Yeah, I'll say it's how are they going to gel again? Yeah, they lost a couple guys to the portal from the O-line. They did go replace them with some O-line guys. So I'm not really concerned necessarily about the offense so much. It's the defense to me for Northwestern, that especially in the back end. The front, I'm not concerned about the front end talent.
Right.
But they lost their top two corner or defensive backs, and they lost their rotational piece, and they didn't bring anybody back in to replace that.
Yep.
So that's where I'm okay. Depth immediate is an issue in my mind. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But from what I've read on them and scouting reports and all this other crap, I'm worried about their depth and the schedule. It's not easy. It's not bad, but it's not easy.
It's not bad. It's not easy either. But they're also breaking in a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
They brought in Zach. Oh man, Lugin, I think his name is. He's
Luton.
a former offensive coordinator at South Dakota State, who's now going to be taking over as the offensive coordinator at Northwestern. That's a big jump. I mean, I don't care who you are, from South Dakota State to Northwestern. That's a big jump. So we'll see what kind of offense he brings. It's I don't know. We'll see. And then also, Brendan, you might recognize his name. They also brought in. He was the last addition to the new coaching staff. That's he's an assistant head coach, safeties coach, and he's the former interim head coach at Michigan State last year, and that's
Yeah.
Harlan Barnett.
Yeah.
So those are the two major additions to the coaching staff this season. So we'll see what kind of what kind of schemes these guys can come up with.
Honestly, I kind of like. I want to say Lujan is kind of how I would pronounce it. I don't. I'm sorry if I butchered it, but I like what they've done. What he did at South Dakota State. They won national championships in 2022 and 23. So I mean, these are offenses that he's leading, and if you can bring any sort of new production with a new quarterback, all right, I can get behind that hire. I mean, we've seen it, with Canada Bourne and others that come up from the lower ranks, and again, that's not derogatory; it's just facts. From the FCS levels, even Division II, Division III levels, bringing them up, and they still succeed. If you win in one spot, you're probably going to win in another. Though, like you said, it is harder, obviously, being in the Big Ten. But I like the hire. I think it's going to do good for them. And then bringing in a seasoned veteran at quarterback. I mean, look, he's been around the block, okay? Talking about Wright. And he was at Vanderbilt. He's at Mississippi State. This guy's been around. He can run. He can pass. That fits the style of offense they want. I'm kind of excited to see what they do there, but I'm worried about this defense. And again,
I'm excited to see their uniforms and what kind of variation of uniforms they pop out this year too.
Yeah, I love Northwestern's uniforms, and also don't forget they just tore down their stadium. And
that's right. They got that new. I saw the rendering of I think 2 weeks ago of the temporary stadium that they'll be playing in right along
Lake Michigan.
There you go. That's the one.
Yeah. Hey man, I do that shit all the time. But yeah, I thought it would look pretty cool. I think it's a neat idea. Play on your practice field right there on the lake. It's a beautiful setting, and by God, good Lord, help anybody. Help anybody. Ohio State, Michigan. So yeah, Ohio State's going to be there in November in Northwestern. Okay,
fun times.
The Gales in November. Remember, okay, that's right. Edmund Fitzgerald, baby, we're bringing it out and we're talking about it on the show.
Look at that.
But seriously, you talk about November games along Northwestern Michigan or Lake Michigan, and you've got the winds, you've got the weather. This could be crazy playing in that little stadium, whatever they got going. I dig it. I support the message. So I don't know. Again, looking at the schedule, you got Miami, Ohio. That's one of the better teams in the group of five, in my opinion. Not the best, but they're one of the tops. Then you got Duke, which is revamped with Manny Diaz. Eastern Illinois should easily be a win. Washington, which again, another revamped team. How are they going to control themselves? Indiana, another revamped team. Look at all the changes that are going on. Duke, Washington, Indiana. If you can find a way, because you already have some consistency that you can build off last year, maybe go surprise one of these teams, shock them. Duke's coming to your field week 2. That's a huge test right there, right off the start. And then Trevor, you got Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan. That's not easy.
That'll be a rough stretch. It'll be interesting to see if they can come out of that unscathed or not.
Yeah. I don't feel great just about the defense. Offensively, I think they're going to be able to move the ball.
I think the over-under is honestly pretty correct in this particular case. I mean, if
agree.
they get to 6 wins, I think that's going to be a successful season this year. Just because with all of the madness that is the Big Ten right now, with the new teams coming in and the West Coast travel and just the 2 buys, like Jake mentioned, it's just going to be an interesting adjustment to the season on top of all of the playoff talk and everything like that, and seeing how that all plays out.
And we saw it last year. I mean, real quick look at their last schedule. They lost to Duke. They beat Minnesota. They lost to Penn State. You lose to Nebraska, but you beat Maryland. You barely lose to Iowa, but then you beat Wisconsin, Purdue, and Illinois. So, I mean, like, you're playing a lot of the same teams. There's no reason that they can't go out and still, compete against these teams.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be doom and gloom at all. That's just, I worried about the depth of the back end, and that's really it for me. Front end, I think you're going to be fine getting pressure, being able to get some offense going. Just get the offensive line's got to gel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say the 5.5 is fair, and it just depends. They have to play consistently. They got to knock somebody off. But that's really all I got on Northwestern, man.
Yep.
That's what I feel is it'll be a solid season, and the Big Ten's deep, so it's going to be a lot of people knocking each other off, man.
Yep.
Well, guys, look, we've covered a lot tonight. Ohio State, our guests from the Walk-On Redshirts. All thanks to you for joining us, Jake. That meant a lot, especially being the first guest. That's huge. And then, obviously we talked Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern. Watch out for these teams. We're going to get this episode out to you. Stay tuned. We got more coming from the Big Ten, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan. Big teams still, and some other teams you need to watch out for. So, guys, please make sure you subscribe, you like, share, comment, all the stuff that, we always tell you. It really helps us out. And the subscribers, especially on YouTube, it's been growing. So we appreciate those of you that are following us. Trevor, you got anything else tonight before we sign off?
We appreciate the listen. Jake, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it, man. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Absolutely. Well, you guys have a great night. We'll catch you later.
Take it easy.